The acceptance email arrived on a Friday afternoon, and Jake read it out loud to the whole family, grinning ear to ear. It wasn't until later that night, scrolling through the application portal with him, that I found the essay he'd submitted and realized he'd written about the one night in our family's history we'd all quietly agreed never to bring up again. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and this is the story of the essay that finally put words to a memory our family had spent years trying to gently forget. "I got in!" Jake practically shouted, running into the kitchen with his laptop, Sarah and Lily and I, all crowding around the screen to read the acceptance letter together. Years of hard work, careful planning, and genuine growth had led to this moment, and the celebration that followed felt entirely deserved. Lily, now 6 and endlessly curious, tugged at Jake's sleeve. "Does this mean you're leaving forever?" "Not forever," Jake said, scooping her up despite being clearly too big to be doing so anymore. "Just for school. I'll be back all the time, I promise." Later that evening, once the excitement had settled into quiet, satisfied pride, I asked to read the essay that had apparently helped seal his acceptance, the personal statement he'd worked on for months, revising it carefully, keeping most of the content private, even from us. "Are you sure?" he asked, hesitating slightly. "It's about something we don't really talk about anymore." He handed me the laptop, and I began to read, Sarah leaning over my shoulder to read along. "When I was 10 years old, my mother asked me to lie to a judge. She'd been coaching me for weeks, telling me exactly what to say to convince the court I should live with her instead of my father. I loved my mother, and I desperately didn't want to disappoint her. But something in me knew that what she was asking wasn't right, even if I couldn't fully explain why at the time. I felt my chest tighten immediately, recognizing the memory instantly. A night from years earlier that our family had, by unspoken agreement, simply stopped discussing once the custody situation resolved, and Emily's own healing had genuinely begun. I told my father the truth instead. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and for a long time, I worried I'd betrayed my mother by doing it. But that single decision taught me something that has shaped every important choice I've made since. Telling the truth, even when it's painful, even when someone you love asked you not to, is almost always the right choice. It doesn't always feel brave in the moment. Sometimes it just feels terrifying and lonely. But looking back now, years later, watching my mother become someone I'm genuinely proud of, someone who did the hard work to become better after that difficult period, I understand that my honesty didn't destroy our relationship. It gave us both the chance to eventually build something more honest instead. I set the laptop down for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of reading my son's private reflection on a memory I'd assumed had simply faded quietly into our family's past. "Jake," I said carefully, "I had no idea you were still thinking about that night this deeply. We haven't talked about it in years." "That's kind of why I wrote about it," he said. "Everyone always talks about the happy stuff in our family. Lily's first steps, the wedding, all the good moments. And those are real, and I'm grateful for them. But that night with the judge, that's actually the moment that shaped who I am the most. I didn't want to pretend it never happened, just because it was hard." "Does it still weigh on you?" Sarah asked gently. "Feeling like you had to choose between your parents that way?" "Not anymore, not really," Jake said. "But I think it's important to actually sit with hard memories sometimes, instead of just moving past them because they're uncomfortable. That night taught me more about integrity than almost anything else in my life. That weekend, Jake decided to share the essay with Emily directly, wanting her to hear it from him before potentially seeing it elsewhere. He drove to her house himself, essay printed out. Sarah and I waiting anxiously at home for his return. He came back a few hours later, quiet but clearly at peace. "How did it go?" I asked immediately. "She cried," Jake said, "but not bad crying. She said reading it helped her understand something she's wondered about for years. Whether I ever resented her for putting me in that position. I told her I didn't resent her at all anymore. That I actually think that whole difficult period is part of why our relationship now is so much more honest than it might have been otherwise." "What did she say to that?" Sarah asked. "She said she was proud of the essay, and that she was even more proud of the person who wrote it. That night, after Jake had gone to bed, I sat with Sarah on the porch, the essay still sitting on my mind. I think I've been protecting myself from that memory more than protecting him," I admitted, treating it like something too painful to revisit, when really, he'd already made peace with it a long time ago. "He's always been able to hold difficult truths better than the rest of us give him credit for," Sarah said. "I think that's exactly what got him into that college, honestly. Not just good grades. That kind of clarity about who he is." Over breakfast the next day, I found a quiet moment to tell Jake directly what reading his essay had meant to me. "I'm proud of you," I said. "Not just for getting in, for being brave enough to write honestly about something most people would have kept buried." "I almost didn't submit it," Jake admitted. "I wrote 3 other, safer essays first, but none of them felt as true as this one. I'm glad you trusted it," I told him. "Some of the most important things we ever say are the ones that scare us most to say out loud." Watching Jake pack for college weeks later, I thought back to that essay often, how a single difficult night from his childhood had quietly become the foundation of the honest, thoughtful person now heading off into his own future. If you've ever avoided revisiting a painful memory, assuming it was better left buried, if you've ever needed proof that honesty, even when it costs you something in the moment, eventually builds something stronger, I want you to know, the hardest truths we tell often become the foundation for the person we're most proud to become. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And if you have a story of your own, share it below. It might just become our next episode. This is Silent Love. And this was a story about the truth that shaped a life.